Let's start getting ready for week 11 of the fantasy season right now by making some smart waiver wire claims. There are a couple of rookies worth adding, but also some familiar names in this week's waiver wire. Let's start, as we always do, with the injury report. And the good thing about week 10, as odd as it was, hardly any injuries to speak of. In fact, this will go pretty quick. The major one that happened early turned out to be a non issue. Aaron Jones in that Vikings game was on his way to another big game until he left. In fact, was carted off. Looked like he might have a fractured rib, but x-rays were negative. He, in fact, came back toward the end of that game, took a couple of carries. So this looks like no big deal. For what it's worth, you might see his name on the injury report this week if the ribs are sore, bother him in any way, if it's that cartilage injury as suspected. Cam Akers did get a lot of carries, although he wasn't very effective in relief. So just something to keep an eye on, but it doesn't seem like Aaron Jones is in danger of missing games. And then the other side of the ball in that same game, Tank Bigsby for the Jaguars left and did not return with an ankle issue. Etienne did, of course, resume the role as the lead back. And it doesn't really matter because the Jaguars are just that bad. And then finally, Dalton Kincaid of the Bills in what could have, should have been a big game for him, didn't finish because he left with a knee injury. At this point, I think it's safe to just drop him. And before we look at the best pickups for week 11, let me remind you that the best pick you can make on Underdog is the free one. That's right, you get a freebie. If you sign up for the very first time on Underdog, you get Matt Stafford just getting 1 yard. Take the higher on this, and this is your free pick. If you are new to Underdog, signing up for the very first time, just make sure you use promo ENDGAME when you check out. Let's start off with the rookies, shall we? And how about a rookie running back who seems to have taken over as the lead back clearly in Denver? That's right, Audric Estime. Talked about stashing him a couple of weeks ago. Sean Payton said something about getting him more involved down the stretch. Well, he definitely did, and it didn't take long. In fact, how about this? Audric Estime in this game where they could have, should have almost beaten the Chiefs. I'm sure somebody will beat them one of these days. Well, Estime was okay. He carried the ball 14 times, 53 yards, so not quite 4 yards a pop. He didn't catch any passes, unfortunately, and I did talk about this as well. He's more of a between the tackles guy, not a huge ceiling, but how about the fact that he carried the ball 14 times while Javonte Williams carried the ball once? That's right, one carry for 1 yard. Jaleel McLaughlin, just 2 carries. So this pretty much is Estime's backfield now. It doesn't look like any sort of a committee or timeshare. They're just going to see what he can do. And I get that it wasn't a great game. But you got to remember also, this was the Chiefs, who have still one of the best defenses in the NFL. Any running back that's going to get the lion's share of opportunities is going to be worth adding. Go ahead and pick him up. He is free because he's owned almost nowhere across fantasy leagues. And then a rookie receiver, I know you've heard of Ricky Pearsall. You had to wonder what his involvement was going to be with Debo healthy, with Juwan Jennings looking good and being back healthy. And we saw it right away. In the first quarter, he took one to the house, that 46-yard touchdown. So yeah, he's on the radar now firmly. I will say, though, Juwan Jennings was the leading receiver in this game, and Debo Samuel is still Debo Samuel. He's probably going to get more touches going forward once he's closer to full health, if that ever does happen for him. So Pearsall went for 4 catches, 73 yards, and that touchdown. So most of his production was on that play. But again, this is what he can give you. He's got the speed. He's in a dynamic offense. And so, yeah, he's not going to necessarily be a target hog based on the competition he's got. Not to mention CMC is back. George Kittle looking good. But Pearsall does have that great upside, as you saw. So I'm not going to say that he's somebody you can just throw in your lineup right away. He's more of a risky flex, with some upside here. But the upside is legit. Did somebody say risky flex? Well, the ultimate boom bust is a guy named Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Yes, we have to talk about MVS. Look, 1 touchdown, okay, fine, it happens, right? Anybody can get a long touchdown like that. Twice? All right, fine. You've got my attention now. MVS in just the first half against the Falcons, 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. So when asking who's going to be the one to step in, fill in for Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed, and Bud Means all being on IR. Of course, we should have known it was MVS. And that is assuming you even knew that he was on the Saints. He was in Buffalo for the first half of the season where he amassed a grand total of 2 receptions for 26 yards. And he had already played a game with the Saints, and he had exactly 1 catch for 5 yards. We know who MVS is. We very clearly know he will do this or he will do nothing. There is no in between with him. And this is what he did in week 10. He went off for 2 long touchdowns, over 100 yards. I don't know what he's going to do next week, and neither do you. It's going to be one or the other. But I guess he's stepping into that Shaheed role. Look, if there is one thing Derek Carr does well, it's chuck the ball deep. I mean, he's always been able to do that. He's got the arm strength, and he's pretty good at deep ball accuracy. So sometimes it'll click, and sometimes it won't. So if you're looking for that upside, here we go. MVS is definitely going to be involved because they literally have nobody else at receiver. How about a couple of veteran running backs that are now all of a sudden resurfacing to relevance? Let's start with the Chargers. You might know that Gus Edwards was just activated after being on IR for most of this season. And unexpectedly, he didn't just share carries with Dobbins. He was actually involved early and often. He was out touching J.K. Dobbins until late in the game. The final tally was J.K. Dobbins 15 carries for 50 yards. Gus Edwards 10 carries for 55 yards. So sure, Edwards didn't see quite as many rush attempts, but he was more effective. I think the most scary and aggravating thing for J.K. Dobbins owners isn't Edwards coming back and stealing some of these touches. It's Hassan Haskins vulturing a touchdown at the goal line for absolutely no reason. I think this must have been like a revenge thing because Haskins used to be a Titan and whatever. I'm not going to worry about that. But you should note that aside from these two running backs, Kamani Vidal, the rookie, was not even active for this game. He was not that great when he got the chance, and now he's definitely not even a factor here. It's going to be these two, kind of a 1A, 1B situation. I do expect Dobbins still be mostly the lead back, but hey, Gus Edwards has been effective. Honestly, it was kind of surprising how ineffective he was as a rusher early in the season before getting hurt. Who knows if there was something that was aggravating him before he landed on IR, but he looked sharp in this game. He's going to get rushing attempts. He's definitely going to get some goal line carries going forward. So, yeah, Gus the Bus is back. And if the worst should happen to Dobbins and he wears down or suffers a bad injury or something, man, Gus Edwards is going to be a very strong RB every week. It's fair to wonder if we have the exact same situation brewing in Pittsburgh, where Jaylen Warren now is going to start to split carries with Najee Harris. He's also a veteran running back that, due to injury, missed a couple of games. Najee Harris looked like he was just owning the backfield. Even when Warren came back, wasn't that involved, wasn't that good. But slowly, we've seen Warren kind of eat into Najee's touches. In the final box score for the Steelers-Commanders game, Najee Harris 21 carries for 53 yards. Jaylen Warren 14 carries for 66 yards. Sounds kind of like the Chargers deal here. Yeah, Najee got more touches, but Warren was more efficient. And unlike a guy like Gus Edwards, Jaylen Warren will catch the ball out of the backfield, had 2 catches, 29 yards. Okay, nothing amazing here. Najee Harris didn't have a single catch. Najee Harris averaging about 2 receptions per game. Warren will get more receptions than that. That's what he does. So I've been hesitant to say that Jaylen Warren has standalone value while Najee is still there. Najee does not miss games, but Warren is definitely getting more involved and looking better. But the reason I'm now in on him, if you need somebody for next week, is to get the Ravens defense next week. And so, yeah, it's a tough run defense, but again, with Warren being the receiving back, he might be the better between him and Harris if you want a Steeler in your lineup. And for those who stream tight end or just need a tight end to pick up, well, how about another Steeler in your lineup and Pat Freiermuth? Muth did score a touchdown in this game. Only 3 catches for 17 yards total, though. But, well, why are we in on Muth? It's the Ravens defense. The Ravens, of course, the worst pass defense in terms of yards allowed, air yards allowed, and specifically to the tight end, the most yards allowed. No, Mike Gesicki did not go off against the Ravens last week, but Tanner Hudson, the number 2 tight end, did. Yeah, Pat Freiermuth is definitely going to have his best game, most likely, in Week 11. You're looking for a tight end, he's still available in about half of all fantasy leagues. And here's your quarterback pick for Week 11 if you stream or need somebody. It's going to be a little bit of surprise here. I'm going to say Justin Herbert is my favorite. Now, Justin Herbert not coming off a very good game as far as passing numbers. Only 164 passing yards, 1 touchdown. They only threw the ball 18 times, which you might think is surprising because the fact that the Chargers had become a little bit more pass heavy as of late. But then you got to think, well, now they got Gus Edwards back. Maybe this is a team that's just going to go back to establishing the run first and foremost. I don't think it's that simple, though. Yes, that's what they want to do. They want to win with the running game and defense. That's not changed, but this is a function of the matchup because the Titans are one of the most heavy run funnel defenses. They have one of the best pass defenses out there, period. So it would be foolish for the Chargers to have tried to pass the ball over and over again. and they really didn't need to. I mean, the Titans weren't doing anything great on offense, so why not run the ball against a team that's far worse against the run than the pass? This week, going week 11 here, the matchup for the Chargers is against the Bengals. And it would be smart for them to pass the ball a lot because Cincinnati has been giving it up. After just getting owned by Lamar Jackson and the Ravens again, Cincinnati's now allowed the fourth most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. And sure, they've played Lamar Jackson and the Ravens twice, but really you step back and think about this. They've allowed that many points to quarterbacks despite the fact that they've gotten to face Jacoby Brissett, Daniel Jones, Andy Dalton, Desmond Ritter / Gardner Minshew, and then that one game against the Browns where they got a little Deshaun Watson, a little DTR, and Jameis Winston. I mean, they haven't had a tough schedule, really, and they're still giving up so many points to quarterbacks. Yeah, this is a game that Herbert could definitely go for 300 yards. And with Cincinnati's offense rolling the way they are, I mean, this might be a sneaky shootout despite the fact that the Chargers don't really want to play like that. And the other thing you might have noticed from the box score here is that Justin Herbert started to run it himself a lot more. 9 carries, including a rushing touchdown. And so Herbert does have that element to his game. If they start to utilize it even more, this makes him, dare I say, a dual threat. Let's go with another QB. If you're in a super flex league or maybe Herbert isn't available, how about Jameis Winston? Coming off a bye, and he is available in almost every fantasy league. Nobody decided he was worth holding on to throughout the bye. I know in the game right before the bye, Winston didn't look that great, but that's because he had to play that Chargers defense. Look, in 2 games, his stat line has looked very different. 3 touchdowns and 334 yards with no interceptions. And then the following week, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions, and only 235 yards. That's because the first week he got Baltimore, and the next week he got the Chargers. Those are as opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of matchup as you can get. So this coming week, who does Jameis Winston get to face? His former team, the New Orleans Saints. Look, I get that the Saints pulled out this victory for their interim coach. It's still not a good defense, all right? Jameis Winston can still definitely go off. And hey, who doesn't love a good revenge game narrative? Most importantly, this team is airing it out with Winston in those 2 games, 41 and 46 pass attempts. He will continue to air it out. And for all those same reasons, if you forgot about Cedric Tillman, he's still available. Some people didn't think he was worth holding on to, and the buyer just aren't buying into him yet. I don't know why. What else do you want? I've heard a lot of comments about his schedule, coming up. It is true. It is statistically very tough. They face a lot of defenses that are stingy against wide receivers. But if you recall that tough matchup against the Chargers right before the bye, he went for 5 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown. And in 3 straight games, he's gone for 32 total targets since becoming a starting wideout since Amari Cooper left. I mean, this is what you're looking for in a guy who's a waiver wire pickup. Steady and heavy target shares, big playability. This guy scored touchdowns, getting those deep passes. What else could you want? And oh yeah, he gets the Saints this week, so this is a great time to buy into him. And for what it's worth, in week 16, which for a lot of you might be your fantasy championship, he gets the Cincinnati defense, that team that they already faced, and he went for 8 catches and 81 yards against that defense. So don't overthink the schedule thing. Tillman has been balling. If he's still out there or somebody dropped him, go scoop him back up. Now here's some players that you can cut loose because it just doesn't look like it's happening for them. Let's go to Indy. No, not Joe Flacco. You really shouldn't be rostering him anyways. Michael Pittman, I think it's time to move on. Now, he didn't play in week 10 because of an injury. It's not just that. It's the fact that Joe Flacco just flat out doesn't look good, and we can't guarantee Anthony Richardson will suddenly be better even if he's given the job back. And even regardless of whoever's quarterback next week, if Pittman is healthy and plays in week 11, it's against the Jets. It is not a good matchup. And if you want to look long term, okay, I can save him for the fantasy playoffs. This is one of those teams, the Colts, that has that week 14 bye, which is super annoying. So you're not getting him there. And then week 15 and 16, very tough matchups. All told, doesn't look like he's going to help your team win it. And I had to say, but it doesn't look like Jonathan Brooks is going to be a thing this year. Activated, didn't play in Germany this week. Definitely not playing because Carolina's on a bye. Is he going to come back after that and be involved? I don't know, but I don't think so because Chuba Hubbard is looking amazing. I mean, it still wasn't a good idea for the Panthers to sign him to a contract because it really makes no sense. But at least it looks like he deserves it. He went off against the Giants, and he's clearly going to be the lead back here the rest of the season. That's why they signed him to that contract. So Jonathan Brooks, just the involvement is not going to be there. I think it's safe to just stop waiting and hoping here. And if you want permission to cut Javonte Williams, it's granted. One carry? Really? I mean, look, he has not been good this year. That's objectively true. But, Sean Payton wasn't messing around. He has made Estime the lead runner here. I don't know if that's going to change. But even with Javonte getting a ton of carries early in the season, he was not productive, has not been, and it looks like his time in Denver might be up. Amari Cooper's time in Buffalo hasn't really begun because he's barely played. And I don't know if he'll play this coming week, but I'll tell you what, even if he does return from that wrist injury, he gets the Chiefs. It's not a good matchup. The following week, it's going to be a bye. I mean, you're really going to hold on to Cooper after giving you nothing and then more nothing. I don't want to drop him if I don't have to, but if you need the roster space, I think it's okay. And finally, I'll just go ahead and say I don't expect Chris Olave to play the rest of this year. I know it's right now IR stint that it's 4 weeks until he can come back. I don't think he will. So again, if you have an IR spot and it doesn't hurt to stash him in that spot, that's fine, but I really don't expect anything from Olave the rest of the season. Don't stop making moves to help your team get better so you can take home the championship. Of course, that includes start sit advice and getting the best info out there. That's where we come in. Check out this week's playlist for week 11.